Let us go ahead and move into our main conversation. Before we do that, though, I do want to go over some housekeeping notes with you all. First off, my name is Charnel Ross, like Joan already said. I am the marketing manager at Bay Area News Group. Just a couple other things I want to go over. If you'd like to ask questions during this webinar, please use the Q&A feature found on your Zoom toolbar at the bottom. You can also use the chat function to put your questions in or any comments that you want to type out during the webinar. We will do our best to get all of the questions answered. If we do not, we do apologize. There have been a lot of questions that have come in prior to, so again, we'll do our best to answer all of the questions. I'd also like to let you know that our next event will be Sip, Savor, and Chat with Amici Cellars. It'll be on December 3rd, right here via Zoom at 4 p.m. We will be tasting some wines with Amici, and they'll take us through the flavors of each wine. So please be on the lookout for that event. There will be more details in the next couple of days, so check back for the registration link on our events pages, mercurynews.com/events, eastbaytimes.com/events, or marinij.com/events. One last thing I wanted to go over is that we have added a short survey to the end of this webinar. You know, we started doing this survey because we wanted to get some feedback from you guys on how we can improve the newsroom at home experience. So we would really appreciate if you just fill out the survey at the end of the webinar. It's really quick, it takes 2 minutes. And again, we really would appreciate any feedback you give us. So now that we have gone over those housekeeping notes, let me reintroduce our host for the hour, Bay Area News Group gardening and wildlife columnist, Joan Morris. Go ahead, Joan.
Thanks, Charnel. Again, just to reintroduce myself, I'm Joan Morris. I'm a garden writer and pets and wildlife columnist. And I wanted to welcome the audience into this webinar on growing herbs. We're fortunate to have 2 experts joining us on the panel to answer your questions and hopefully demystify the art of herb gardening. Rose Loveall is the co-owner of Morningsun Herb Farm in Vacaville, an absolutely fabulous nursery with thousands of herbs and other plants. And Florence Nishida is a Los Angeles County Master Gardener, as well as a botanist and founder of LA Green Grounds. So ladies, thank you so much for joining us. I thought perhaps we should start sort of at the beginning. A lot of people have started victory gardens this year during the pandemic, and there is an incredible interest in gardening in general and herbs specifically. So what does the beginning gardener need to know to get started? And maybe Rose, will start with you for some of your suggestions.
For most culinary herbs, I think it's important to look for the sunnier areas of your garden, whether you're going to be putting containers there or you're growing in a raised bed or in the ground. 6 hours of sun is critical for most of our common culinary herbs. And that's even in Vacaville, even in hot Sacramento, anywhere where it's warmer, 6 hours is still critical. It's also important to prep your soil. So think of it as the foundation of your house. If you're in an area with heavy clay, which many people in Northern California have clay soils, you do need to lighten up the soils where it's a heavy clay. It's a wonderful starting point. Clay, everyone curses at it, but it's actually a great place to start. But we tend to lighten up our soils with plenty of compost. So we use a lot of compost. Sometimes we're adding 4 inches of well-composted compost to our top foot of soil. And we tend to build up a little bit of mounds where we're planting in ground, especially for Mediterranean perennials like sage and lavender and rosemary, so they don't drown or have wet feet during the winter. And then I would try to plant the herbs that you love the best first, but I wouldn't disqualify anything new, because there are so many wonderful new herbs out there to give a try to. So I'd leave a little space in your garden for, for some new introductions and some experimentation.
I would echo what Rose just said. The sunlight is important, and I would encourage a lot of you who are going to be planting in containers to consider the herbs that you use the most and put those in the pot the nearest to your kitchen door. Because if you have to walk down into your garden, you probably won't get around to using those as often. So make them really accessible to you. And the other thing is, I really would encourage you, I agree with Rose, you should try some new things. There are several Asian herbs that are really worth growing. They'd be hard for you to find otherwise in markets, and if you did find them, they're going to be expensive. So besides growing herbs or any food that you like, I also encourage you to grow something new and that would be expensive. You'd like to have it, but you don't want to spend that much money.
What are some of the common errors that people make when growing herbs? I know maybe water might be an issue, overwatering.
Yes, people tend to overwater their herbs. They'll water them every day. They'll water them 3 times a day. I'm always shocked by that. And they water for like 30 seconds at a time or a minute at a time. Most of the herbs that people are familiar with and they'll start with are Mediterranean natives. They want deep, heavy, thorough watering, but infrequently. So in our own demonstration gardens, most of our herbs only get watered once a week once they're established deeply. And then we tend to put those herbs that need more water, parsley, basil, dill, cilantro, to one area of our garden so that they will get watered more and they will get watered more deeply, and they're also going to get fertilizing more continuously. So the other herbs we fertilize usually with just a little bit of earthworm castings once a year in the spring. But those other annual herbs that need more water, we tend to fertilize those in the ground. We try to do it once every 2 weeks, if at all possible.
I think you'll find that if you plant your herbs according to their water needs, it'll make life easier for you. So as Rose pointed out, the soft herbs like basil and cilantro and those things, you could plant them right among your vegetables. And I like to do that, interplant chard, for example, with one of the herbs. And then you can use the Mediterranean herbs that don't require as much water to use those as borders, because those don't get as much attention from the average gardener, and they won't get overwatered that way.
Right. So are there herbs that we can plant and grow now, or do we really need to just plan and dream and wait for spring?
No, this is easily a 2-part answer. I'm sure with the area where Florence is, it's warmer than we are, but even here in Northern California, in many areas, you can still be planting your perennial herbs like sage, rosemary, thyme, oregano, lavender, salad burnet, even the lemongrass we tend to plant now. I like fall planting and early winter planting for a lot of my herbs because I think things settle in a lot easier. They can get strong during the winter. During those heavy rain periods, they'll put on nice, good root systems. And in the spring, they're ready to go and they're a lot healthier. They're not struggling with our trying to figure out how to water on a 90-degree day and then a 70-degree day and a 90-degree and 70-degree day. So I would fall plant all of your hardy perennial herbs now.
I'd like to add a plant that most people don't think of as an herb, but it qualifies because it has strong flavors and you don't use gobs of it, and that's onion, the green onion, the scallions. And I've been for years planting bunching onions, and I like those very much. They're so easy to grow. Anybody can grow them. You can grow them in pots, you can grow them in the ground, and they become like perennial plants because they continue to give you new growth. You can plant that now. You can plant it all year round, in fact.
Getting some questions about whether you could list some plants that like a lot of water, and maybe some that are more drought tolerant.
I think that's, Rose had touched on that, and these are the ones we would plant right among the vegetables. And there's what I call the sort of the soft-stemmed plants, so that's basil and cilantro, the onion, because they don't act as perennials. So you can plant those, you know, and they will require the same amount of water that, say, your chard does.
Rose, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. You keep all of those soft herbs together, your basils and parsleys and that kind of thing. Most of the common herbs that, perennial herbs that people are used to growing can take fairly dry conditions. Mint, of course, is one of those that can take a lot more water, but heaven help you if you plant it in the ground or in a pot that's near the soil, because I've made that mistake of going, it's in a pot, but the second it hits the soil, it discovers the soil, and in about 2 hours it roots in, and in about 2 days it's, you know, at your neighbor's house. So I don't want to dissuade anyone from growing mint. It's an important medicinal and culinary plant and a great plant for pollinators. And if you're a mixologist and you like to have a bar to tend, you need to have mint for your mojitos. So in pots with more water for the mints also.
In pots on your deck.
Yeah, on your deck, on a hard surface.
For some of the herbs that might be frost tender, if you have them growing in pots, can you bring those in during the winter, or should you leave them outside?
What size is the pot?
I don't know. I guess mobile, you can carry it.
Yeah, I think that I've had success with sort of shallow pots, so they have a large surface area, and so those are carryable. But you know, soil with water in it can be very, very heavy. So if you have that kind of weather where you need to shelter your plants, it might be a good idea to, instead of planting 3 different herbs in one pot, which would require more soil and a larger pot, then grow them, you know, in separate pots. For sure, mint falls in that category.
I've always been a California girl, so I don't know anything about East Coast gardening, but certainly when you read East Coast journals or magazines, they're bringing in things like rosemary into their basement or garage. I can't even imagine.
Geraniums.
Geraniums. I'm a super lazy gardener, so that is not going to ever happen for me.
Right.
But a lot of plants do get brought into the house. You tend to carry insects in and diseases, so things that are not a problem outside become a problem indoors, like aphids and spider mites and various diseases instantly become a problem. So they need more care that way. And then, of course, watering changes dramatically when you go from outdoors to indoors.
Is it feasible to have an indoor herb garden?
There are some things that you can grow indoors if you have a good sunny window. I mean, an east window would be terrific, because you know, herbs are plants. They do need to photosynthesize. They do need some sunlight. I think the greater threat to indoor growing is your house heating.
Mm-hmm.
Your house heating dries out the air. It's less moist usually than outdoors, and so you're going to have to be careful about your watering because your plants can get dehydrated.
Mm-hmm.
And then indoors, because you're indoors a lot, you tend to overwater. and you think, oh, I forgot to water my plants, and you tend to then drown the roots and kill the plant. So those are the two main hazards.
Florence, we're getting some questions from people that want to know more about Asian herbs and ask that maybe you name a few of your favorites or ones that people might like.
All right, and some of them fall into the category of what you can plant now. There's an edible chrysanthemum, probably Rose knows it. It's Chrysanthemum coronaria, and it's in Japanese. It's called shungiku, and it is a chrysanthemum, and it has yellow daisy-like flowers, as chrysanthemums will have. It can grow as a pot herb, but you can also, if you grow it in the ground, you can also let it become shrubby. If it becomes shrubby, then of course the taste is going to become stronger. So most people harvest it, when it's about maximum 12 inches high or to 15 inches high. The edible part, all the parts are edible, but we generally eat the leafy part and the tender stems, and it is an exquisite plant. It is, you can cook it, you can braise it or steam it, and then wring it out and cut it the way we do spinach, and use some ponzu sauce or a little lemon juice and soy sauce, and it's just beautiful. We also use it in soups, and in that case, we don't use it as a soup herb so much as on top. You put that in, and you get that very exotic flavor. The other one that most people know about is shiso. If you go to sushi restaurants, you'll probably see it. Generally, it's a dark red, burgundy red colored leaf that the chefs will put little neat little piles of shredded daikon radish on it. But it's a wonderful herb to eat for itself. Again, in soups, we can wrap rice with that, and it's called shiso, and the genus is perilla, Perilla. So those are my two favorite ones.
Perilla has become one of our most popular herbs to sell in 2020. I've never seeded so much red, green, and Korean perilla as this year. So it is the herb to grow for 2020 and probably 2021.
I'm very glad to hear that. And the other thing, that's another one that is great for self-sowing. If you plant perilla in the ground in your garden, you will have it now. You will have it forever. So, and it's a beautiful plant to have, so you can use it as a border plant as well as an edible plant.
Yeah, that's what I was going to add too. It's very pretty. It's super pretty, and even when you let it bloom, it's really pretty.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you spell that?
Shiso is S-H-I-S-O. Perilla is P-E-R-I-L-L-A. And I think
Great.
the species is frutescens.
Do all herbs need to be grown in full sun, or are there some that are extremely partial to shade? Rose?
Definitely curly parsley, more than Italian parsley, will go in more shade. Some of the purple basils will take a little more shade. The pesto perpetuo basil will go a little more shade. Chives are kind of, easy herbs to grow anywhere, and they'll do more shade. Your mints, I don't think we mentioned it before, but chervil, which is a very interesting anisey flavored fluffy herb, that will grow in more shade. Yeah, those are some of the more
and
common. Perilla, that's right, perilla. And cilantro will grow in more shade. Even dill will do a little bit of shade.
That's good that now we know what's going to be the hot herb for 2021. Hopefully it tastes better than cilantro. Just my personal bias.
They're both really good.
Some of the questions that we're getting, let me find those. When you're repotting herbs, I don't know if they're talking about from like a small pot into a bigger one or from a pot into the ground. Are there any special steps you need to take to make sure that the plant survives well?
I don't think there are any special steps. If we're talking about bringing in a 4-inch nursery pot and then potting that, you know, you can, I mean, a clay pot will have good drainage and it won't be as water soaked. When you're repotting, when you remove the plant from the original container or from the old container, you want to look at the bottom where the roots are, and you want to make sure that the roots are not circling around. When you buy a plant from the nursery and you pull that out and it's been circling around, that means that plant has been at the nursery for too long. But so you need to pull those roots loose, and if necessary, you can trim those because a plant will grow new roots, and then put them into a slightly larger pot, not an excessively larger pot, unless you're going to do 3 herbs in one pot. It's the roots will fill a slightly larger space, but they kind of get lost when it's huge. Mm-hmm. That's my suggestion.
And overwatered. When you move a small pot into a much larger pot, overwatering tends to be a big problem. So to just upsize one or two sizes from a 4-inch to a gallon is plenty big, unless you're arranging in like a half barrel, you know, 5 to 7 herbs. I wouldn't put just one plant in a half barrel because the overwatering problem tends to be what kills the herbs in that side, when you upshift too much.
A lot of people are asking for some information on medicinal herbs. I think pretty much all herbs can be used for medicinal reasons, or that's originally what they were used for. Do you have any thoughts on medicinal herbs, Rose?
Well, you know, 80% of the world still uses plant materials as their primary source of medicine. So most culinary herbs are also medicinal herbs. If I was growing just a couple herbs to use for medicine making, it would actually be some of the common culinary herbs. Oregano, thyme, and lavender would be the 3 that are excellent for using for medicinal herbs. We grow a whole line of medicinal herbs, everything from St. John's wort, which can actually be kind of a weedy plant, to, of course, echinacea, which is probably one of our most popular herbs to use medicinally, and it's probably one of the few herbs that has been truly researched in Western medicine here in the United States for medicinal use. So echinacea would be another one. Of course, one of the easiest ones to grow for fun for tea making is chamomile. Chamomile is an easy one to grow. You're harvesting just the flowers, and it's almost a weed the way it grows, so there's lots of flowers. But I would really look first at your common culinary herbs. Again, it's one of those things that people get all bummed because you know I lead them into the same spot for culinary, medicinal, and edible flowers. Herbs are really multifunctional. It's a really awesome part of growing herbs is you could have a tiny garden and many uses. So look at those common herbs first as part of your medicinal cabinet, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Florence, did you have any thoughts on that?
No, I agree with her, and I also we do plant some things that come from other places like Mexico or Central America in our garden, and there, of course, people use those plants multi-purposes, not only for food, but They use them, for example, to relieve menstrual cramps. They're used to aid digestion, to remove worms. So, and I agree with Rose, there isn't a widespread knowledge of Western research results on the use of these herbs. In those cases, there is one book by a shaman of our Southern California Native American, Cecilia Garcia, who's done a book with a USC pharmacologist, and they talk about the California native plants and their uses, their various uses. And the pharmacologist, adds his knowledge based on research. So that might be a good book for people to source.
If you have space, grow nettles. I know that sounds crazy. And being a forester first and battling nettles for several years during my forestry days, I never thought I would grow nettles commercially, but I grow a lot of nettles and I sell nettles. So if you're interested in everyday health, to get a source of calcium, magnesium, selenium, chlorophyll into your body, nettles are great to eat, not fresh, of course, but for wilting and using as spinach, like a spinach, or tea making, or tinctures, or dried form. So eat your medicine. And the herbs really make that easy to do.
I know that UC Berkeley's botanical garden has a whole Asian medicinal garden. So some of you want to go and visit that. I think it might actually list what cures or treatments for each herb is listed for. But Florence, can you give us the name of that book and the author again that you recommended?
Yes, let me go. Can I go find it?
Oh, sure.
Give it to you later?
Go ahead, and we'll talk to Rose for a minute.
Okay.
Rose, do you have any books on, someone asked if you just have one book on growing herbs that you would recommend. Do you have one?
The Rodale Press puts out a couple of different herb books. There's a pretty comprehensive one, encyclopedia of herb growing, and then they do have like an everyday book also. Those Rodale Press books are great because they give common herbs, but then they also give fun folklore, which is a really great thing about herbs, is they have such long histories and uses, and even some simple preparations and adding them to your garden. So I go to Rodale Press.
Yeah, so this is the book. It's Healing with Medicinal Plants of the West. Oh, it's backwards, isn't it, on your screen? Cultural and scientific basis for their use. The authors are Cecilia Garcia and James D. Adams, Jr.
Okay. And Ashley just said that she did an internet search on Perilla, and it said that it was toxic, could be toxic. Is that something to be concerned about?
What can I say? Centuries of use of that plant. I've never heard of toxicity.
I haven't either. I don't, anything, I guess, if you eat way too much would probably give you an upset stomach, but
right.
I don't know anything about toxicity.
Yeah. And also, you have to be careful what you get on the internet.
Yeah. So when you go to, for example, Rose's herb farm, and you've got 2 million choices, maybe that's an exaggeration, but you have a lot of herbs to choose from. How do you know which ones to pick? How do you know if you're going to like the taste of them? Do you have any thoughts on that, Rose? Or should we just buy everything in your garden?
Absolutely. That's the best choice. Buy it all.
Right.
No, well, for example, maybe the two most common ones that people sit there with glazed eyes over when they come to the nursery is oregano and basil. And there are so many flavors of basil. There are so many possibilities with oregano. You know, I have people that come through and graze a little bit, and we don't use any toxic chemicals, of course, on our herbs. Everything is a organic method that we use both for fertilizing and any sort of insect or pest control. So I get people that try leaves of each one, and it's one of those things that's easier when kids come to the farm for a tour, because they're more than willing to go, I'll try chives, I'll try this. You know, the adults go, I'm not going to put an oregano leaf in my mouth. I know it's too strong. But, you know, you have to, I think trying it before you use it for cooking is the way to do it. And if you grow your own, that way you can have many flavors. So just as an example, people come in for oregano, and there's the sweet Italian oregano, there's the spicy, hot and spicy oregano, or there's a Greek oregano that's pretty spicy. And then there are some oreganos that aren't even oreganum, because oregano is a flavor, not a plant. So we have a Mexican oregano that's a lipia, and it's super hot and spicy. But if you're cooking Mexican or Hispanic food, that's the preferred oregano to use. There's even an odd oregano that's I can't remember what, it's a plectranthus. And to me, it tastes like Vicks, but if you're bacon, it is the oregano that you use for cooking. So, so try it. Make sure before you try it that it's okay and that it hasn't been treated with anything. And then I'd give it a try, especially those types of herbs of which there's many, many choices.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, that people can graze in your nursery. And Joan, I'm sure people can graze in your garden, your demonstration, as people can at our teaching garden. One thing I noticed, I've always planted marjoram, which is an oreganum, and I much prefer it to oregano in general. It has a lot of good flavor, and it's spectacular with in salads, with any tomato dishes. And I'm always shocked that nobody knows it. They know oregano, but for some reason they've never tried marjoram, so that's worth growing. And the other thing that that people, you know, have never tasted is the chive buds, which are really, again, excellent. You can just throw those in salads for a bit of hotness. So some people like herbs that are really hot, and those are harder to find usually. The other favorite herb I have that I use for everything is thyme, and I think that's a good starting point, because you can use that. It makes a wonderful salad dressing. Thyme, olive oil, vinegar. That's it. Perfect salad dressing.
So how do you, I'm sorry, go ahead, Rose.
Well, I'll just say thyme is also a salt substitute. So for those of us, of which there are many, that are trying to reduce how much salt we use, thyme is an excellent choice.
Is when you harvest your herbs, is it best to use them fresh, or do you want to dry some of them? Or there's some maybe that don't dry well that you should just stick to eating fresh?
I think basil doesn't dry all that well, but certainly all of the other herbs dry really well. So when you're doing your pruning, when I'm giving a haircut to the marjoram, you know, you just grab the whole thing and you just chop it off because you've got new growth underneath. Then you rinse that off, and then I don't hang my herbs to dry. I just leave them out on a tray, you know, inside my dining room, and they just air dry in about 3 days or so, depending on the weather. Then I just easily strip those leaves off and crumble them if I need to, and then put them in a glass jar with a tight lid, and then you've got a supply. And you can do this, you know, several times through the year, depending on how much you use herbs. You can certainly give them away. You know, that's the other thing. When you do your pruning, take off the, you know, the things that don't look great, but you can bundle it up, and then you can give them to your neighbors or your coworkers. You know, they'll be very grateful and appreciative.
It's a good idea to harvest the herbs during the season, because some things like lemon verbena will go totally dormant, and there's nothing better than some lemon verbena hot tea in the middle of the winter, and you certainly can't go out and get fresh leaves then.
Right.
So
Yeah.
dry those, and even if it's just a lot of times people will just buy a screen like for a window and set it up between two chairs or whatever, and that way you get airflow through your herbs, and you do it in the shade, and you turn it every few days, and you don't need any special amazing equipment. I see some great stuff you can buy. Some of it's quite expensive online, but you can definitely, I mean, we've dried herbs for thousands of years, and we've done it pretty low tech.
Right. About lemon verbena, you know, the aroma is one of the most important things about it, not only the flavor, the lemon flavor. So get it really well dried, and then put it in absolute, you know, air-locked either bag or a jar, and it will last very well for 2 years, the aroma and the flavor.
We're getting some questions about, well, first of all, people are asking whether you can freeze herbs, and if there's a preference between, is drying better than freezing?
I think I would dry.
Yeah.
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 I don't see the need to freeze. And why do you want to take up more freezer space? And then remember that humans have been drying herbs for millennia, right, without a freezer. So
Yeah. I think drying is far easier than freezing. Probably the only thing I do freeze is I freeze my pesto, and I freeze those in those old ice cube trays, and that way you can just pop out. That's the only thing, because it's kind of a pre-made little herb blend. And I freeze it with the cheese. I know some people say you can't, but I freeze it with the cheese in it already. That's really the only thing I freeze. My freezer can be a scary place, so you don't want to put too many things in it.
We're getting some questions about lavender, that it grows, it gets spindly, it becomes less attractive, and then just some general questions about how you keep your herbs from getting too leggy. So Rose, do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, we could probably do a whole class just on pruning things, especially different times of year, different species, different genera. Lavender, there's a video that you can get you from the home page of our website that's just about growing lavender, and it actually goes through a little bit about pruning lavender, because we prune it heavily, like I said, 30% or more below the flowers to keep it from getting spindly. It should be a long-lived perennial herb. It should look good in your garden for 10 years in general. And I know a lot of people rip it out after 3 because they haven't pruned. And again, prune to harvest. Think about what you can make with those herbs. Strew them on the ground. We'll just throw them out on the ground in the pathways to trample on. They smell great. They, will make your feet smell good, and it's just wonderful. And if you have chickens, which along with pandemic gardening, chickens are all the rage now, and chickens love herbs. They love herbs, and it's actually great for them from a medicinal standpoint, and it's great for their eggs as well. We have donkeys, and our donkeys love all of the herbs, so they're my composters. But prune because you're going to use it either for the smell or bouquets of flowers. It doesn't have to be a flower bouquet in your kitchen. It can be an herbal bouquet.
you can make potpourri with the lavender flowers, especially, and then put that in your bathroom. It makes your bathroom smell nice.
Are all the lavenders edible?
Yes, all the lavenders are edible, but some of them taste terrible. So those are 2 different questions. For cooking, we usually only use, I will only use English lavender, which is Lavandula angustifolia. That's the only species I use for most of my cooking. I will use the intermedias for something spicy or something that's more of a main dish, a meat type dish. like Grosso or Provence. But in general, I use the English lavenders for cooking, and even between them, there are slight differences. But yeah, there's definitely flavor profiles that they all have. So just like the oreganos, it's great if you can taste them.
Mhm.
We have a question from Verna, who says she mostly grows French thyme, but have some English thyme, I guess, growing that doesn't seem as flavorful. What are some best or some good uses for the English thyme?
I think English thyme is really good. I don't particularly care for the lemon thyme. I don't think it's as flavorful, but I use thyme, as I said, for that salad dressing. It's my standard salad dressing, and it's also terrific on chicken, roasted chicken. So you can either put sprigs of thyme, or you can peel off scrape off the leaves. So it goes well with chopped with pork as well. It's great for vegetables and for meats.
And you can use it medicinally during the winter. So a lot of people, if they have stuffed up noses, they'll actually use it as part of a steam. So they'll actually, bring the water to boiling, and they'll put thyme in. Thyme is a wonderful antimicrobial. And then they'll let it cool a little bit, and then put the towel over your head and over the bowl, and be careful not to burn yourself. And thyme is terrific. I would, if you don't find it to your liking for cooking, think of it as a medicinal plant.
We have a reader asking, how do you harvest the nettles?
Carefully.
With thick gloves.
That's why I have employees. With gloves, long sleeves and gloves, absolutely. That's the best way to harvest the nettles. And then the second you wilt it, you let it dry. It is wonderful for tea making once you let it dry. Or you steam it like a spinach, and it's actually delicious. And if you've ever had nettle soup, it's the most amazing shade of green you will ever see. It's very nutritious. It's good for you. It's a high source of usable calcium. So I use it as a tonic herb. I include it almost every day in a tea blend. So I take it as a tea, or you can take it as a dried herb. And then the crazy thing, of course, is that over many centuries, people have flogged themselves with it wherever they have sore muscles and joints, because it hurts at first, but then that uric acid that causes that sting actually does help with a joint inflammation. So I don't flog myself with it, but I definitely ingest it a lot.
That's a cure. Like if I hit you over the head, you'll forget the pain in your arm.
Is it just nettles, or is there a specific type of nettles?
Well, it's the Erica dioica. So it is the one species that I use. I don't really know about the other species if they're as useful, but the species on it would be dioica, and that one is excellent. It's a hard one to add to your garden if you have children, because all of the herbs we interact with, and we touch them, and we feel them, and we put them in our mouths, and we smell them. And nettles, you have to kind of it's one of your stand away plants, but you can grow it in a big pot. I have one person who said they grow it along their fence line, and it stops anyone from jumping over their fence. They can't know it if somebody did it.
Well, we've been talking about all the beautiful qualities of herbs, but I have several questions here from readers asking about pests. And Rose, I know you have, I don't know if you quantify it as organic garden, but I know you don't use chemicals. So what pests do you see most often, and how do you control them?
Mostly we see aphids, spider mites, occasionally thrips on some things, woolly aphids sometimes, and then in the fall, those the white moths tend to come in and they get one thing in the mint family. This year it was rosemary they were eating. Sometimes it's mint. So we go from least toxic first, and so we usually just use insecticidal soap when we do have to spray, and then we spray. You know, you have to be on a regimen. You can't just spray once and think that does everything for you. So we usually spray in cycles of 5 days, and usually 3 times, and we can break the cycle. We will use neem oil, particularly at this time of year. We tend to get a little bit of powdery mildew also on a few things, like on our monardas and our menthas. That's, you know, we don't have too many other problems other than that as far as pests go.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the advantages of growing herbs. If you have limited space for growing edibles, not only do you get the value of the herbs, but you really have low pest management problems. And our garden is organic, and we don't spray. I think we've sprayed with neem oil just once. In general, our herbs don't get any pests.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Diversity is important.
I had a couple of questions about people having trouble with white flies. Do you have any issues with white flies?
Oh, I'm so glad they haven't found us.
They're horrible, I know.
They are horrible.
Mint actually gets white fly. That is the one thing that the white fly loves. And so mint, fortunately, is one of those things that a heavy duty pruning all the way to the ground never hurt any mint. So first thing we'll do is just cultural. I mean, cultural is always the first thing to try to do with any sort of a insect pest problem is, what can you do culturally? And we remove everything. We actually put it in the green waste bin. We don't try to compost it even on site. So we get rid of the eggs that way, as well as the adults and the source. And then we do usually spray neem oil for the white flies. But first cultural, and try to give more airflow, because that also reduces white fly problems.
And one word that I always teach my students when we're talking about pest management is vigilance. And the average home gardener might not be really looking at their plants. And I advocate, unless you have a huge area, and of course for Rose's nursery it wouldn't be possible, but I encourage people to do hand watering, just so they are out there and in close quarters to their plants, so that they can notice if there's a difference. So if you see that a plant that was previously flourishing and all of a sudden one part of it's brown or wilted or something, then it gives you a chance to get a closer look, and then you can stop the problem while it's still small.
Michelle has a question about something I dislike even more than cilantro, and that's California ground squirrels. She says they've been harvesting everything from fruit trees to garden foods to flower leaves, and what can be done to deter them from this. We are going to have a garden webinar on gardening with wildlife, but I don't know, do either of you have issues with ground squirrels? Uh-oh. Well, we had a horrible problem with them when we first started our demonstration garden. And we tried all sorts of things, and the only thing that we found that worked was exclusion, burying a fence 2 feet down, and then having a fence on top with a shock wire. Doesn't hurt the ground squirrels, but it does keep them from getting into the garden, and that is, I'd say, 99% of the battle, if not 100%. But I'd be interested to hear what your experiences have been. So Florence, you to have a reaction to that?
I'll let Rose take this, because I'm not ready to give my frank answer.
Yeah.
No, it's not a shotgun.
Yeah. I was saying lead poisoning with a shotgun. We've always had a little problems with ground squirrels. Our nursery is out in the country, and we're surrounded, including on our own property, by delicious fabulous English walnuts. So we have food always for ground squirrels. So, you know, I have a lot of cats, which is an unfortunate thing because it affects the bird population, but they help to keep the ground squirrels down. I've had to trap them using the live traps. Of course, what do you do with them once you trap them? It has to be up to you, how you're going to handle them at the end. Exclusion is one way. We're on 3 acres, so excluding ground squirrels is you know, it just doesn't work where we are.
Right.
And we don't use any kind of poisons because we do have a lot of owls and cats and foxes and coyotes and even a couple of mountain lion that wander through. So yeah, it's an ongoing battle, I'm afraid.
I think for the average urban gardener, probably having a dog or cats is about the only thing that you can do if you're not comfortable with trapping and then, you know, disposing.
Yeah, there is a state law that says any animal that you trap live on your property, you either have to kill it humanely or release it onto your property. You can't take it down the street or to the neighbor that you don't like, or you know, whatever. So, and we're starting to get toward the end of this, but I wanted to circle back to a topic that we discussed in the headliners session, and that is cilantro, because getting tons of questions on cilantro. Someone told me I was being mean to complain about it, so I won't complain about it. But so what's the best time to plant it? What are the best conditions, soil conditions? How much water does it take? And how do you keep it from flowering? Those are the questions that we have. So who wants to start on cilantro?
Let me start on it. You know, I'm a home gardener in our garden. We have cilantro growing that we didn't plant. It just planted itself from the seeds. I told our volunteers, don't cut down all the cilantro, you know, that had gone to flower and seed or bolted. Let's leave one plant. And so now it's planted itself, I would say about 3 weeks ago. So we can have cilantro around the year, except for those really torrid months, you know, July, August, September, and this year we've had heat waves in October. So planting it is not a problem. As far as it going to flower, all plants are going to go to flower or they'd be failures as plants. So just accept it, you know, and plant enough and over a period of time so that it doesn't all go to flower at the same time. So as you get those, you see those feathery leaves that Rose referred to, that means it's getting ready to do that. You know, immediately plant more seeds. And again, as I said earlier, cilantro seed shouldn't be planted too deeply. And Rose suggested that she pre-soaks. Or you can lightly crush that outer, there's an outer shell, and the seed is actually inside that outer shell. So if you lightly crush it without damaging the seed, that'll probably speed up germination a little bit. You need to keep the seed bed moist, but you know, not soggy wet, and throughout its growing period. It just needs a moderate amount of water. It's I think fairly easy to grow if you can get it to germinate, and that's where the tricky part is.
And I have to say first, Joan, that everyone's noticing that you've been photobombed right over your shoulder. We can see.
This is my dog, Bailey.
We love Bailey. I would, you know, cilantro is one of those herbs that people either love or hate. And depending, everyone has their own taste buds. So if your taste buds are all soap, nobody likes to have their mouth washed out with soap. So cilantro is not going to be your favorite herb. It is super easy to grow, and letting it go to seed means that it's going to drop seed and it will just replenish itself over and over and over again. And of course, while it's in flower, it's another great plant for pollinators. So
Yes.
all parts of its life cycle can be useful, even if it's not just for, us to use. So to think of it that way also, and to give up in July and August if you're any place with low humidity and high temperatures, and think about using some of the substitutes like the rau ram, the Vietnamese coriander, which is the botanical name is Polygonum odoratum, or cilantro, which is used a lot in the in kind of like southern Mexico, and it can take hotter temperatures also. So think about switching to a different source of cilantro, and then go back to the soft leafy cilantro in the fall.
Do you pinch the flowers on cilantro like you do with basil? No.
No, they are really terrific for pollinators. And it's not just the regular honeybee, but also our native bees. And for the same reason, we let a lot of plants, at least, if we've got several, we let a few go to seed. Fennel is terrific for pollinators, and ladybugs love fennel. And my mustards, as it's getting to the end of that, season and it's flowering, then we don't pull everything out. We always leave one to go to seed, to flower, and then go to seed. We collect the seed because we're mostly planting heirlooms, and then the flowers are loved by the bees particularly.
And don't forget that coriander is just the spice part of the cilantro. So cilantro, the leafy part, we use for cooking, and coriander, which is the seed part, we use for cooking as well. So you can eat the seed, and there's a lot of great recipes to use for cooking with the coriander seed also.
Okay, I'll stop my campaign against it and just accept it. I think we have time for maybe one more question. And Jay Murray asked, if your garden space doesn't get the full sun for 6 hours, are there any reflective materials that bounce adequate light to help growing?
How much sun do you get? How much sun does he get?
He or she didn't say.
Okay, because we both referred to some herbs that will grow fine. I mean, they won't grow lushly, but with about 4 hours of light. And I think parsley is one of those. If you want basil, it does need a lot more sunlight. But coriander, cilantro, doesn't need 8 hours of sunlight. So pick the ones that will do all right under your conditions.
And of course, things are hot against a white wall, so I'm always telling people not to plant a lot of the different herbs right up against that white wall if they don't like tons of reflected heat. So if you're trying to give it a little more heat, a white wall would be great to put behind, so you'll get that reflective light off the light color.
And maybe we'll sneak one more in. What is a preferred fertilizer for herbs?
We just use compost.
Compost, compost, compost.
Compost. In the ground, where compost, we'll use a little bit of earthworm castings. A little bit goes a long way. You don't have to pile it in there. And we use slow release organic fertilizers a lot in our 4-inch and quart containers. It's good because they tend not to be too smelly, so we don't have problems with it being dug up, especially we're out in the country again, so raccoons and possums are our constant friends out there. And it tends to last longer because people tend to forget to fertilize. When you are in a little container, it's different than being in the ground. If you never fertilize the rosemary again in the ground, it probably would do fine.
Right.
But
in fact, it's better not to fertilize rosemary.
Yeah.
I think, because remember, if you fertilize these herbs and they grow larger and more rapidly than they would normally out in nature, then you're setting yourself up for a major pruning task later on. So I think that with herbs, you really don't want them to become very lush You want them to grow enough to their potential so that you can taste them, but not beyond that. We also have a worm farm, and so we use the worm compost if I need to, maybe once a year, twice a year. That's about it.
Yeah, the worm castings are pretty potent. Well, I think we're just about out of time, but I wanted to thank everyone for joining us today and to thank our panelists for their time and expertise. We could probably talk for days about herb gardening and still not cover the entire topic. So I did want to let you know that I will be writing an article that tries to cover most of this and some that we didn't get to. So keep an eye out in the paper and online for that story. So Charnel, did you have some closing thoughts?
Yes, I do. Thank you so much, Joan, for hosting the webinar, and thank you, Rose and Florence, for allowing us to pick your brains and really give us some great advice and learning tips for herb gardening. We really appreciate you guys joining us. I know there was a lot of engagement from our audience, so we will be sending out a recording of this webinar in the next day or so. And also, like Joan said, she will be writing an article to try to answer most of the questions that you guys asked. I know we were not able to get to a lot of them. There were lots of questions that came in, so we will try our best to get those answered for you. So that brings us to the end of our event. I'd like to thank you all for joining us. Please take a couple of minutes to fill out the online survey. You should see it now on your screen. I also want to let you know that we will, again, we will be sending out a recording. So please be on the lookout for that. Also, this is the first episode of a 5-part gardening series. We will be covering other topics starting next year, in the beginning of next year. So please check back on our events pages as we will be updating them with our future events. And also a reminder that we will be updating our page with our next event, which is Sip, Savor, and Chat with Amici Sellers. That'll be on December 3rd at 4 p.m. So make sure you check back on our events pages for more details on that. And that wraps it up for us. I want to thank you all again for joining us. And I hope you get to fill out the survey, and I hope that you all have a great rest of your week. Thanks for joining us again. Bye.